Okay, we're going to move on to the implant delivery and expansion portion of the procedure, and these are the instruments you'll need to do that. The inner and outer tube assembly is the same assembly that you've had with the Generation 1 handle. However, I'm going to highlight the X handle, which is the new handle the engineering team has developed for us here at Amplify. It's got a couple of nuances I want to highlight for you. You'll notice that it doesn't have a silver lever on it, and the drawbar does not have the thick black threads. The thick black threads and the lever handle go together. The new drawbar with the non-lever and pull pin handle go together. They are not interchangeable. The first thing you'll want to do is load the tube assembly onto the handle, same as before, where it rotates and clicks into the holes. And if you need a little bit of help with that, have the scrub tech pinch the two silver tabs, and that seats in place, okay? You'll notice it has a pull pin on it, and that's going to become apparent as to why we need that in just a second. It leaves a couple of threads of slop, I call it, to where we can compress the implant after it's loaded. You'll see what I'm talking about in just a second, okay? The implant, once opened from the package, comes in a blue pouch. I recommend leaving it in the blue pouch and having the scrub tech just expose the hub of the implant through the blue pouch and keeping it compressed like that for loading. For demo purposes though, I'm going to show you what it's like to load the implant without the blue pouch. I asked the scrub tech to keep the implant compressed between their fingers. And if this was, the hub was a spigot of water, it would pour right into their hand. That's to eliminate them from trying to hold the implant like this. It doesn't work once we put it onto the handle, and I'll show you that in just a second. So keep the implant compressed the entire time and load it on to the handle. I like to have them put the proximal end of the handle against their belly and then load the implant with no space between the implant and the outer tube, keeping it compressed the whole time and turning the thumb wheel finger tight. Keep this compressed, don't let go. Now you're gonna have to hold it with one hand to get the drawbar in from the back. That's why holding it like this doesn't work. Hold it like this in one hand, a whole assembly. And using gravity with this drawbar, it's a two-stage insertion. Use gravity and just let the drawbar engage the nose of the threads at the distal tip. That's what you did when you turned this knurled handle, okay? The second step is now engaging the drawbar to the handle, and that requires a plunge and turn. It requires you to do that the whole time until that's finger tight, okay? So it's two distinct processes. One, put the threads into the distal end of the implant and the threads of the nose. And then the second one is to engage the drawbar into the handle by doing the plunge and turn. Now, you see how the implant is a little bit sloppy when loaded onto the inserter when you do that. Here's where those threads come, the pull pin comes in. Pull the pin, and that gives you a couple of threads to turn back counterclockwise to compress everything back together again. And now you're at zero in order for the surgeon to receive the implant for insertion, okay? If for some reason the pin disappears, or you're doing a second level where the scrub tech turned the handle and didn't realize where they were, we can do this a different way, in that I would ask you to take the handle, hold the counter torque portion of the handle, and turn it counterclockwise the entire way. If you turn this clockwise and continue to turn, the Acme bolt will come out, and we can take it out for cleaning. It goes right back in again. But having that happen on the back table may be a little disconcerting to the scrub tech if they're not ready for it. So you don't want them to be able to turn clockwise the whole time. I want you to turn counterclockwise until the handle stops. There we go. Now, turn clockwise 3 half turns. 1, 2, 3. That's the equivalent of having the pin in the handle. It gives you those couple of threads slop, I call it, to wind the handle counterclockwise to compress everything back together again. So even without the pin, I can load the implant as before, keeping it compressed, turn the thumb wheel, keep it held compressed the whole time. Use gravity for the first stage, right? Just 2 fingers on the drawbar engages the threads into the nose, and then a plunge and turn does the rest. Now, turn back those 3 half turns and you're back at 0 again. Okay, so that's how to load the implant and ready for hand to the surgeon for implantation. I want to make sure people know that the handle has 2 different sections, 2 distinct different sections. The more distal section is the counter torque section. That's the one that accepts the counter torque over the thumb wheel. The end plates of the implant, the orientation of the implant is that of the thumb wheel, meaning that if the thumb wheel is cephalad caudad, craniad caudad, so is the end plates of the implant. And then once I put the counter torque on there, the counter torque is now parallel to the disc space. And I want to make sure that when we insert the implant, I want to take a lateral image, a true lateral image, and I want to make sure that you see a true lateral of the implant. If for some reason there's any ghosting, that means it's being rotated. And you can imagine if there's ghosting on a lateral image, you're going to have rotation on an AP image, okay? So you want to make sure that you use this portion of the handle to find your proper rotation orientation and maintain that once you find it on that lateral image. And then the big part of the handle is used for expansion. Okay? Once you find that orientation of rotation, I want you to look up here on the drawbar. And it says collapsed. There's a laser mark that says collapsed. Once I start deploying or expanding the implant, when I turn the handle clockwise, you'll see the implant start to expand laterally. And there's a line here at about 5+ turns of the handle. I've gone from collapsed to laterally expanded. The way the implant works is even though the drawbar is threaded into the end of the nose, the implant doesn't work on a threaded basis. The implant works on a slide basis, which means that these slides are pulled when the nose gets drawn back by the drawbar, up or down these ramps, and until they get into these little detents, those little recesses, and those are the passive locks. When the passive locks engage, you'll hear a little click or a pop most times, and there can be up to 8 of them. So you may hear multiples. Don't let the surgeon be alarmed by this. Tell them to expect it. And that's a good thing. Those are passive locks which hold the implant expanded until we can get the final lockout screw inserted. And that's another step of the procedure. So those passive locks need to be engaged by continuously turning the handle through lateral expansion and into vertical expansion. Now, you'll notice that the drawbar draws the nose of the implant back toward the handle. So you'll need to have the surgeon mallet forward or anteriorly as we go through that lateral expansion. Once we get through lateral expansion, you want to take an image and make sure that you're as anterior as we can possibly be, because that's kind of the last chance you can do to get there before we go up in height. Same procedure, you keep turning through it. They may notice a difference, they may not. And we'll go to vertical expansion. Now there's a little line that says vertical expansion, it's a thick one. And I just have them turn till they can't turn anymore. That's more likely to have some locks engaged and keep it expanded. So just go till it stops. Don't have them stop at the line. Have them go past the line if they can, okay? Now you're fully expanded. The procedure now is to remove the drawbar from the implant because the passive locks are engaged. I can turn this knurled handle counterclockwise. You'll hear a spring in there, no big deal. And if it stalls slightly, turn the handle back about a half a turn. It just releases the pressure on the drawbar and the drawbar comes out. Okay. Then you can remove the counter torque or not and depress the 2 silver tabs on the handle. And the handle comes off. Now you have an expanded implant in the disc space with the inserter tubes still attached. Okay. There's a couple of accessories that you can use during the expansion process. But with this Acme handle, this X handle with the new thread, called an Acme thread, very, very efficient at delivering force. You have a couple of accessories that can be used to help you. One of them is the T-handle. T-handle goes over the handle and can be used for increased leverage. There's good and bad. This is a great source of leverage. However, you can't see your laser markings, and I don't encourage surgeons to mallet on top of the T-handle. It could cold weld on there, and I recommend them take it off in order to mallet, put it back on again to expand. Okay? The other accessory you have is a wrench. Fits over. Nice thing about this is you can see the laser marks. However, it gets a little bit funky ergonomically, especially if they're trying to hold the counter torque and do the wrench at the same time. It gets a little cumbersome. Perhaps if they have an assistant holding the counter torque, this works great. And you can see the laser marks and you can mallet as well. The other accessory you have is a dual-ended wrench. Works the same as the single. And I'm okay if you use this as an ergonomic wrench, meaning one-handed. Once the surgeon puts 2 hands on this, I get a little nervous in that I don't want them using 2 hands to deploy an implant. It shouldn't be that hard to do, especially with the new handle. Okay? All along this whole procedure, there is the slap hammer that works alongside the regular handle as well. And so that's dual purpose with the trials and the handle. And that's available to you.